Hi guys, it is Aoife from Words of Clover and I'm here today to do a video about 2026 Irish releases that I'm really excited about. There are a few of these that are already out or about to come out, so if they sound interesting to you, you can already get them. Others I'm sure you can pre-order or just put on your to be read list for this year. But it is a bumper year of Irish releases, so yeah, really exciting, and yeah, I can't wait to read all of these. So I'm going to tell you all about them now, the ones that I particularly am looking forward to reading. So the first book is a book I'm actually currently reading right now, and that's The Truth About Ruby Cooper by Liz Nugent. Liz Nugent is a kind of psychological thriller writer, and she always writes characters that are really flawed, really kind of twisty family dynamics, and people who are just really like, it feels like they're like bad to the bone, but then there's always normally a very good kind of comeuppance, or like they kind of get their just desserts in really kind of evil ways eventually in her books. So yeah, they're always really fun to read and just really engaging, and ones that you can just like, you really just sink your teeth into and you just like keep reading, which is what I'm feeling at the moment reading this one. So in this one we're following two sisters, Ruby and Erin. Their mother is Irish and they grew up in America, and then when Ruby is 16, something happens in the family which ends up with Ruby and her mother moving back to Ireland and Erin and her dad staying in America. And we kind of see how their lives kind of continue quite separately. They only see each other like every couple of years, and their relationship wouldn't be as close anymore. And we just see how, because of this incident that happened, how their lives change quite dramatically. And we're following Ruby, who was kind of the more troubled of the two sisters, and she's going through a lot of ups and downs, particularly around sobriety. And then we're also seeing how Erin is dealing with relationship issues as she is growing up in the States. And yeah, it kind of, everything is kind of continuously coming back to the thing that happened when they were teenagers. And Ruby is, yeah, some things that you learn about her are quite like astounding, and what I'll say is kind of giving like Liz Nugent meets Atonement in that way. In terms of the sister dynamic, you have a sister who's quite perfect outwardly, and then another one that's a little bit all over the place and a bit meddlesome. So yeah, it's very good so far and I'm really enjoying it, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it ends up. The next book is actually, we have two books by this author coming out this year. One is What Happened to Madeleine Stone by Louise O'Neill. I think this is coming out in April 2026. And in this one we are following again two sisters. Kind of funny how, I feel like it's so funny the way book trends happen. You just might get a lot of books that have like first names in the title. Now we were having two books with that are like looking at sisters. So we're following two sisters who I think are child actresses, and I think one of them takes off more than the other, and then now it's like years later they're adults, and I think one of them has gone missing. And I think Louise O'Neill normally does books where she's gazing on, you know, she has a particularly like feminism, just kind of women in general, like the gaze on women and kind of social issues, and whether it's social media influencers, beauty standards, things like that, and she always has a really good way of like looking at things, toxic relationships, stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how she looks at this, I guess, like child actresses and that whole dynamic, and that whole conversation. Looking forward to seeing what she writes about that, because she always has, I feel like she's always a little bit ahead of her time as well in terms of what she writes too. So yeah, looking forward to this one and can't wait to read it. And then she also has a memoir coming out, a non-fiction book called A Bigger Life, and it's just about, I think it's about her own kind of relationship with eating disorders, sex, relationships, love, herself. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading that. I would read a grocery list that Louise O'Neill writes. So the fact that we're getting two books this year by her is just so exciting. So I can't wait for that. The next book I want to talk about is a sequel. So it's All Hail Chaos by Sarah Rees Brennan. She came out with Long Live Evil, I think it was last year, or I read it last year anyway. And in this one is kind of this urban fantasy, I think there's a particular word for this genre. We are following a character who is very sick with cancer. She is dying of cancer in the hospital, and then she ends up getting this chance to basically live a completely different life in her favorite fantasy book. So she wakes up, she kind of goes to sleep and she wakes up and she's in the body of like the infamous villain of her fantasy novel, of this fantasy series that she absolutely loves, but she knows that where she is at that point in the book, the next day this villain is going to get beheaded. So she has to figure out a way to make that not happen. So she kind of ends up, you know, engaging with all of these characters that she knows about and has read about and loves, and also kind of trying to like make things better for herself in terms of her character, but also not change the story too much of what she knows about it. So it's really, really interesting. It's really fun, really, really funny. I think it just does really great things in terms of fantasy tropes, what people love about fantasy. And I think you can feel that Sarah Rees Brennan had just a really good time reading this. So All Hail Chaos obviously takes place after Long Live Evil. There's like this big kind of shock ending with Long Live Evil, and All Hail Chaos will continue on from that. So I can't say too much about it, but I'm very much excited to read this when it comes out and see what happens, because yeah, it was definitely a pretty chaotic ending for Long Live Evil. So I'm looking forward to this one. The next book I'm excited to read this year that is coming out is Everything That Is Beautiful by Louise Nealon. Louise Nealon read Snowflake, or wrote Snowflake a few years ago, which I really, really enjoyed. And this one, we're again looking at a character who grew up in kind of a more rural farming environment in Ireland, and we're following a particular character whose name is Neve, and she has this really close relationship to a neighbouring family who own a farm. They're the Foleys, and she basically grew up on this farm. She's like best friends with the girls, and now we know that a few years later into their adulthood, the family ties are strained, the friendship is strained. Could have something to do with a romantic relationship, I'm not sure, but I think we're following the three different girls and what is going on in their lives, and how there is an event that's going to bring them all closer together, near like that they're kind of coming up to, and I guess it's about how like what happened between them and how maybe they're eventually going to come together again. I really, really loved Snowflake by Louise Nealon. I loved how she wrote this young messy female character. I don't know if we're going to have three messy female characters in this one or what exactly the characters are going to be like, but I'm really, really looking forward to reading it and finding out what the characters are like. Another exciting book for me is Stations by Louise Kennedy. Louise Kennedy wrote Trespasses, which I really, really enjoyed. I reread it this year as well, and again it was like a 5-star read. It has been turned into a mini series as well for the television. I still haven't watched that, so I do actually need to watch that soon. It's on like my list of perpetual things that I need to watch. But in this one we are following two characters. I think it's a boy and a girl, Roisin and Red. They meet as teenagers. They strike up a friendship in the 80s, and they're really, really close, and then eventually I think Red moves to London and the friendship kind of dims a little bit, and then we're following them as Roisin eventually goes to London, and I think she's brought into the chaotic world that is Red's life, and I don't know whether things happen between them or what, but that is kind of what we're looking at, and it's described as a devastating story of love and friendship and the choices we blindly make when we were young, unaware that the consequences will reverberate throughout our lives. So yeah, sounds pretty good. Loved Trespasses by Louise Kennedy, so absolutely can't wait for this one. Loads of great Louise books this year between Louise O'Neill, Louise Kennedy, and Louise Nealon. And then the last book I want to talk about is Brigid by Kim Curran. This is a kind of historical fantasy. I don't know whether it's historical fiction or historical fantasy. And this is basically, as far as I know, I think this is basically like a fictionalized tale of Saint Brigid, or Brigid of her great big cloak. And she was kind of both a Celtic goddess as well as a saint. So I think that'll be really, really interesting to kind of see about how she grew up, how she like lived in Ireland, yeah, her life, her cloak, the story of her cloak, and how she spread her cloak around to protect the land and the people. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I actually don't know that much about this, except that it is kind of surrounding the whole lore of St. Brigid, and that just interests me. This one is already out. It came out in January, so if it interests you, you can already go and pick that up. So yeah, hopefully I'll be able to read it soon. Thank you guys so much for watching as always, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.